I
All right. Welcome everybody to another Ultra Charity Dev interview. For this interview, we have the big man himself, Hakita.
Hi.
Hello, Hakita. So I I mean your name's right in the start of the game, so I'd be surprised if somehow people miss that. Um but could you just tell us all what you do for Ultrakill?
Well, I'm the lead developer, so I do the directing and the game design, level design, sound design, music, writing, animation. Basically, if there's something, like I say in my credit museum thing, if there's something that's in the game, then I had my finger in that pie.
Cool. Yeah. So yep, everything pretty much to some extent at least.
Yeah, just very limited in terms of 2D and 3D art, but I do still do a little bit of both for the game as well.
And from what everyone else will hear from the other interviews too is that you give a lot of direction on those things, and you're
Yeah,
there for the iterative
one
process and all that.
yeah, one of the great things about working with a small team is there's a much greater feeling of like having a consistent feeling of direction and like a consistent style and such. And if it was like a big team, it would be a lot harder to be able to make the whole thing feel so like directed. But with a small team like this, I get to really do keep up with everyone and keep with like a one-on-one, like make sure that we're all on the same page at all times.
Yeah, and it definitely is felt. I mean, I can definitely tell, especially from hearing all of the other interviews at this point, because you're the in the timeline of doing these interviews, you're the last one. But like, just from what everyone else has said, like everyone's on the same page, and it's super awesome to hear that.
Except in terms of story, I basically never tell anyone about the future of the story. And it's not that I don't like trust people. It's just that it's one of those things that's like when I try to explain any of my ideas, they sound so much worse than if than once when they're actually done and in the game and such.
Yeah,
So I usually just don't even bother.
yeah, which is fair. Um, so kind of moving on. If you're comfortable, just giving kind of your game dev history and kind of your media history in general, because I know that you've dabbled in some different medias. So if you want to talk about all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So for me, I've always been sort of general artist. So for me, games are really just another art form that I can use to express myself and put my ideas out there and such. So uh, fairly like I used to dabble in game development when I was a kid using Game Maker and like FPS Creator and stuff and making custom levels in like Little Big Planet and whatever. But I never really considered it like an actual thing for me to do as a focus in my life until I was looking for where to go for like higher education. I tried to get into a music school and then a film school, and I failed both entrance exams. So then my mom was like, "Well, there's this game design school that's open, and you could try going there." I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And then I did. Uh, so that's kind of the general gist of how I really started to focus on game development. And luckily, I get to also do other art stuff on the side, mostly music, because that's kind of my biggest passion. But I do some writing as well. And I used to do, when I was a kid, I used to do a lot of like short films with my friends, but that I haven't done that in a very long time.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you have a much more diverse media history than I thought. So that's really interesting to hear. Just your whole kind of journey and story and the culmination of your experience and how it's kind of gotten you here. That was great to
Yeah,
hear.
one of
Thank you.
those things is that people might not realize is like everything that you learn in like one art form is transferable to all other art forms, because most of like a lot of people ask like why, like how can Ultrakill be such a quality game if it's my first attempt at a commercial product, and it's because I'm applying a lot of what I learned while making music, and I've been making music for like easily over a decade at this point.
Yeah, and I've listened to some of your older albums and I like them. I can hear bits of the Ultra Kill soundtrack, or at least the older part of the soundtrack, in them still a little bit here and there. Kind of an
Yeah,
interesting thing to
especially
hear.
during like because originally I wrote all my music in MIDI, and then around like 2016 2015 or something like that, I started trying to like get into recording actual instruments and stuff.
Mhm.
So that changed my process of writing music a lot. So that's sort of what you hear in the prelude is that process where
Mhm.
instead of writing music down like beforehand, I usually just like doodled around with an instrument, and then I was like, oh, I like this idea, and then I recorded it, and then I started recording the other instruments on top, and I just, instead of writing anything beforehand, it's just like basically like sectioned improvisation.
Mhm.
So that's why Prelude is so simple compositionally, and then as I sort of started to find my stride in terms of the direction of the music, it started getting a lot more complex compositionally.
Yeah. And that's now like now that you mention it, because of course, when I'm playing the game, I'm just playing the game. But now that you mention that, like I can definitely hear it, and like especially like just I mean, I'm sure everyone can tell kind of the evolution of the soundtrack of the game, and just how it evolves from Prelude even to just like layer 2 or 3, how much it evolves.
Mm. And yeah, that's one of those things that I mentioned earlier. Like a lot of the lessons that I learned from making music that I'm applying to game development is
Mhm.
one of the things I learned is that my process works best when I make everything like fully chronologically. So I start at the beginning and I work further from there, because that always gives the whole thing like a feeling of organic progression, as both I improve in terms of skill, and I gain a clearer understanding of what I want to do with the project. Then that also sort of, that still feels like a natural sort of journey in a way, instead of it just being like sort of going back and forth of like, oh, this is now this, and then
Mhm.
it's a different thing, and then back, because you sort of understand what the thing is doing at the same pace that I understand it.
Yeah. That's really cool insight to hear. Thank you. Thank you for all that. Um so kind of moving on. Sorry. Yeah, kind of just moving on. I'm trying to like maybe rearrange questions on the fly
Hmm.
here, but I don't think I need to. But because I guess yeah, because this is kind of part of your your history at this point. But how long would you say Ultra Kill development has been going on? Like maybe to like give you like a concrete starting point, like when when Ultra Kill was like the idea, like you kind of had the goal for Ultra Kill.
The very general idea, I don't remember the exact time when it happened, but was for a school assignment. We were designing like a main menu for a game that we like came up with ourselves, and the idea was sort of to try to impart the general vibe and idea of the game through just the main menu. And I named mine Ultrakill, and it was like a horror action FPS kind of painkiller vibe. So that was like the sort of, you could consider that the first.
Yeah, the seed.
Yeah,
of Ultrakill.
But the actual development didn't really start until what we consider the start of development is like February 1st of 2018. So that's almost 6 years ago.
Wow, that's wild.
It's a very slow and long process, but that's a big part of why it is the level of quality that it is that I've just been able to develop it gradually instead of having to worry about like deadlines and such. I never really had to rush any of it.
Yeah, you don't got to worry about deadlines or like existing in general.
Mm.
Yeah, that's super cool to hear that Ultrakill just kind of started as a title screen.
Mm-hmm. And it was a very different vibe and main menu than what the actual game ended up being. But that's where the title came from.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like with all things, you know, how it starts off is generally not exactly how it ends up anyways, so. So the next I guess almost the rest of the questions, honestly, because that a lot of that was, you know, the long far back past, and kind of just like to get people caught up with who you are and what you do for the game. So to just kind of, you know, put a personality and history to the game, I guess. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling, but the rest of the questions are going to be similar to questions I asked the first Ultra Charity round, but I want you to try to focus on the past 2 years of development. I know that's so much time, and I'm sure it's, you know, who knows how it's been for you. I mean, past 2 years for me have been, I feel like, a blur.
Yeah.
But yeah, so a lot of these are kind of more tailored to these past 2 years of development. And a lot of them I'll specify too. So for this first one, are there any big challenges you've faced in the past 2 years in terms of development?
It's nothing but challenges at this point. But I think the biggest one is a constant, which is that because the game is so old and I started making it when I was so wasn't very good at doing like programming and stuff. It's a big complex building built on very faulty foundations, which is just a constant pain in the ass of like, if you change something that you think would be harmless to change, then it can have massive ripple effects, and you'd have to like play through the entire game again to make sure that everything works properly. And that's like, even though we have a great QA team, there's like limits to what human beings can do.
Yeah.
But outside of that, also, it's something that I make a conscious effort of. It's like trying to make sure that the development team is always like a little bit challenged in terms of what we're doing, because that's like how you grow as an artist and as a creator, is by being challenged. So I'm always trying to push us a little bit outside of our comfort zone to make sure that we're always pushing into some directions instead of getting complacent and feeling to like working by the numbers. So I think the big reasoned one was 7-4. The boss fight with the Earth Mover was a big challenge, not just because of the scale and the intricacy of the level itself, but also because we had to basically do a completely different process for it, where I had to do like back and forth work with Victoria instead of just doing the level by myself, which I usually did, or honestly always did. But in this case, it was very much like we started with Big Rock making the concept art for the Earth Mover, and then Victoria made a block out of that, which is just like the simple basic shapes, so that we can sort of get the general idea of the scale and proportions and stuff. And then based on that, or like using that block out, I then planned out like the level progression and all the like different little moments that would happen, and I made like a basic version of that, and then Victoria would make the rest of the model using that block out of the level to make sure that it's like it functions well. And then we had to do a lot of back and forth afterwards, as I started sort of putting all the functionality in of like the boss fights and stuff. But like it's a lot. Usually, I had always done all the levels by myself, with like the big exceptions being like the sandbox and 5S being by Peter, and then the Credits Museum being by a wizard who we picked up as like a temporary worker to make that. But outside of those, it's like just entirely me. So having to do this like constant back and forth was a very new and refreshing way to work on the level. And I think it also shows in terms of like how different it feels and all these little how like there's a lot more like quote unquote bespoke material to it, where it's a lot more organic feeling, and there's much more all these little details that are like specifically made by an artist specifically for that one moment, instead of being more like I ask for a general asset and then I use it as I see fit kind of thing.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, thank you. You did a couple little cool things you threw in there too. I had no idea Peter was the one behind the 5S either, so that's a fun little fact.
Yeah.
That's really cool to learn.
He did basically everything for 5S. When I did my pass on it afterwards, I basically just did like some iteration. I did like the lighting and the mood and the effects and like general atmospheric stuff and the music, but like in terms of all the functionality and the actual geometry of the level, that's all Peter.
That's so cool. That's really yeah, I didn't know that. So that's really fun for me to learn. I'm sure it's fun for a lot of people to learn too, hopefully. So I'm glad Peter gets his shout out here.
Shout outs to Peter.
Yeah, big shout outs. So moving on, and it sounds you kind of touched on it here and there. But are there any like major things you've learned in the past 2 years while developing?
I think probably the biggest thing that at least comes to mind is so one of the things I didn't mention in terms of challenges is that making the second Prime Sanctum P2 was like a massive fucking challenge for me in terms of like work motivation and stuff, because I had been working on the game for like 5 years, so I was really starting to feel just fucking done with it. So that single level took like half a year to make, just because I was getting so like both because I was just getting so tired of having to do the same thing, but also that was then further aggravated by the fact that it's such a difficult level. So even just like testing it was really exhausting. But then something I tried with Peter initially while I was working on that was a new process where we would hop into voice chat and basically would stream our screens to each other as we worked. So it would be like it's kind of like a game development equivalent of like parallel play where basically just the fact that seeing someone else work as you're working sort of helps
Yeah,
motivate you
for
to work
sure.
more. So I didn't do that much with Peter. We did a couple times, but sort of then we made a Discord channel specifically for that, and that's when me and Salad, who also drew Yakido,
Hmm.
me and him started really doing that a lot, and that was that's such a we basically started doing it every day almost, and that was such a huge improvement in terms of both making development more fun and making improving the flow. That 7.1 took 3 months to make,
Hmm.
and then I started doing that with Salad afterwards, and 7.2 only took 1 month.
Wow.
So it's a huge improvement
Oh,
in
100%.
terms of the pace and motivation and stuff. So that's been a really big change for me in terms of the process of making the game.
Hmm.
So I think the big thing I learned was that working alongside other people actively and not just in terms of just checking in on each other occasionally is
Yeah, even if it's just being in each other's presence kind of thing.
Mhm. And it also helps a lot in terms of if you're working on something and then you're not 100% sure of if this is the good way of doing it, then you can easily just talk back and forth with another person, sort of shoot bounce ideas off of each other and sort of
Hmm.
just discuss how it might feel and look and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's really cool. And I mean, I'm sure that I'm sure people are going to hear that and be like, "Oh, that is a really good idea." Cuz yeah, it does sound like that really helped your mental, which, working on something
Yeah,
for so
it's
long, yeah.
it's obviously different strokes for different folks, so it
Mhm.
might not work for everyone. But if there's game developers listening to this right now who have issues in terms of just when they boot up their programs, or even not just game developers but artists and stuff in general, is if you have that problem often where you just either never boot the program up or you just boot it up and then stare at it for a bit and then close it, it might be worth trying out having a artist friend or something like that that you can do sort of parallel working with. Might be very helpful for motivation.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Like I said, it's always just so interesting hearing all of your processes and how, especially everyone I've talked to before, just how things have kind of how they've all grown and their processes have evolved. So it's really fun learning and
I
hearing
think
about all of it.
there is a funny anecdote to that where when we were wrapping up on the violence layer, one of the things Salad was saying, because he was there for almost the entire development of the violence layer, is one of the things he said to me and Victoria was he already knew that we don't really plan much ahead in terms of the game,
Mhm.
but he was still really surprised by how much we just make up on the fly of just oh, here's a thing we could do, can we put that in, can we work that out, and then just go back and forth and then sort of worked stuff out that way, where it's very Ultrakill's development is very improvisational, it's very organic.
Yeah. And I mean, the crazy thing is, from my point of view, and I'm sure for a lot of people's point of view, it feels all planned. That's the really great thing. All of these interesting organic ideas are just coming out of the air, and then you all are kind of working together as a team to make them feel like it's been the plan all along.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of there's a lot of general ideas of the framework of here's, I want to do this kind of thing with this part, but then all the the actual execution of it and the all the details and stuff are basically sort of just as made up as we go, and as we figure out that's oh, this is a cool thing that we could do, and then we notice a little thing, and it's like, oh, maybe we could do something with this, and that sort of makes sure that it has like that we're, rather than being a sort of held to a predetermined like plan, we basically just like, if we notice something that would be better, then we can do that instead of being basically shackled to the original plan.
Oh, that's great. Everything great to hear. It makes me super happy to hear that, it sounds like motivation is high as of late. So it's super, I don't know, I don't know the words I'm looking for, but it makes me happy. It's a very feel good kind of thing to hear.
Yeah, it's definitely the process is improving, and it's definitely even though the expectations are obviously getting higher and higher. I'm pretty confident about at least the near future of development.
Yeah. So kind of going off of it very conveniently. It sounds like the entire process for everyone has been getting better and stronger and all of that. How would you say the entire team, like as a unit, has grown over the past couple of years?
In kind of what way do you mean?
So maybe just like of course you touched on like the kind of workflow, but maybe things like, communication, or just the going off a bit more on people throwing out ideas and things like that. Like, do you feel that people have gotten more comfortable throwing out their ideas, and that there's a lot more of kind of a an open room to kind of bounce ideas off and implement things and all that?
I think it's mostly the same. We've always been pretty open in terms of like ideas and such, and I forget who it was, but someone at one point said that one of the things they really liked about the development of Ultrakill is that it's very much like they can just be like, oh, I had this thing that I would like to add to the game, and then I'm just like, okay, yeah, go for it. But in terms of like just for most of the team, things have stayed pretty similar lately, especially with 7.4. Victoria has sort of become more active in sort of the how would I put it, like maybe not in terms of direction, but at least in terms of execution, where we sort of go back and forth on the ideas and how we're going to put it together more than just being like, she asks me what she should do and then I tell her and stuff like that.
Yeah, and we talked about, me and Victoria talked about that as well, kind of the a lot of the process of 7.4. So wherever I think this interview is probably going to fall pretty early in the event, so people at least have that to look forward to, because we do talk about that, a lot of the process of how 7.4 was made, which is very interesting.
Yeah, and I think she has more to say about that than I do, because it was like, I've been making levels for so long that like for me it was like different, but it wasn't like different enough that I was like that I would have that much to say about it. Whereas that was sort of her first foray into actual like making a level for Ultrakill.
Yeah, and we had a big part of our conversation was about that. So make sure you stick around and to listen to that.
For the next 15 hours or however long the stream is gonna be.
Please don't say that. I have to work after the event.
I don't.
Oh god. All right. So yeah, it sounds like there really wasn't much growing to do. It sounds like the team has just stayed strong. That really sounds
in terms
like
of like in terms of like physical growth, we added Hectech as a stable team member, because originally we had them do iteration on the style system. While we were working on the second act in like the Wrath layer and stuff, and then we added them as a stable team member, like I think earlier this year, so that they're an active programmer with all the stuff now, and the next layer is gonna have some big stuff from that Hectek's been working on. So look forward to that.
Yeah, he briefly, very, very briefly mentioned that. And I was like, oh, maybe we could talk about it next year. And he's like, oh, we'll see.
Hectek goes by they, them.
Oh, my bad, they. But yeah, we talked about that a bit, and they were like, oh, yeah, maybe next year. Your words, not mine. We'll see.
Things happen when they happen, so we'll see.
Exactly. This is kind of encompassing all of Ultrakill development, not necessarily just the past 2 years, but of course if it is related to something in the past 2 years, of course that's fine. But is there anything that you've become especially proud of for Ultrakill?
I think honestly the one thing that's currently on my mind is the fact that I feel like I've been improving in terms of writing, both in terms of like having the sort of general ideas tied together well, and in terms of actually like putting the words on paper. Because especially earlier on, I was doing a lot more back and forth with Jacob, who did a lot of the like prose writing for like and dialogue for Gabriel and the intermission and stuff. And then during Act 2, I wrote, because I write all the terminals and stuff myself, and then I write all the dialogue and stuff in the Prime Sanctums myself. But like the books that you found in the game in Act 1 were mostly, I was just like explaining ideas that I wanted to have to him, and then he would be the one writing them. And in Act 2 we had more of like a 50-50 split on those things, where like, for an example, the Layer 4 book about the insurrection, that was like, it's almost like one paragraph's mine, then one paragraph is his, and the one paragraph is mine, and stuff like that. We're doing a lot of like, I was a lot more involved in terms of like the actual wording and phrasing and stuff. And that's also very much present in like the game dialogue and the second intermission text. And then everything in Layer 7 was written just by me so far. And personally, I think my favorite thing that I've just written was, in terms of like how well I think it succeeded, is the secret book in 7.4. I think that's my best work in terms of just like putting words to paper. And one of the things that like really helped Ultrakill's writing is the fact that I decided very early on to like not set anything in stone until it's necessary to do so. And that has very much helped me, because I've gotten so much, like, at least in my opinion, I've gotten so much better at writing, that because I didn't make those decisions early on of like, this is this and this is this and this is how this works, that means that now there's so much like blank space that I can now fill up in a way that's a lot more satisfying than if I had just made decisions early on and then tried to work around those decisions.
Yeah, that's super cool to hear. Like, it's again kind of like that whole the, like what I mentioned earlier, where a lot of Ultrakill stuff is kind of just pulled out of the air, but you just tie it together so well. And
thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a wholeheartedly a compliment. Like, For sure. But yeah, it's really interesting to hear especially your whole writing process, because I personally really love all the logs and stuff. I'm not one of the lore experts by any means, but just the way they're all written is it it very very much fits the tone of the game, and they're good. They're good.
Thanks. And something I try to really focus on is making sure that like different texts that are written by different characters have a sort of different voice to them. So the terminals have like all the like enemy logs and stuff have a very like objective and clear and like informational tone, whereas then if you look at the Prime Sanctum terminals that are like very very clearly written by a person instead of being like informational, it's like you can sort of you get a different vibe from that, especially with like the little side notes and anecdotes and edits and stuff that you have in those. And then I think especially the what I'll for spoiler reasons I'll just call red text is particularly like strong in terms of characterization, and I'm very very happy with how I've been able to get that across. And there's like an interesting aspect to that where I had already like these little bits and pieces of that character, but then I sort of didn't really have a clear picture of that character in my head in terms of their motivation and goals and stuff. And so instead I had to sort of, because I had all these pieces and I felt that they fit the same character, so instead I had to sort of start to look at it from an audience perspective. So instead of being like trying to figure out what the character should be as a writer, I was like trying to figure out what the character is as a reader. So I'm like trying to tie these things together and try to make a coherent whole of like picture of like who could have written these things, and that sort of made it click into place of like why these things work together, even though there's some aspects that seem so like almost contrary.
Yeah, that's very cool insight. And like I said, I am the furthest thing from a lore expert with Ultrakill. I just play game and shoot funny coin, but yeah, it's all that stuff is definitely things I've picked up, like just.
And that's a very conscious decision. It was very early on in Ultrakill's development, was that I wanted to make sure that like even though I want to focus on the story myself, I wanted to make sure that it's in a way where if you don't really care about it, you can very easily ignore it and just play the game for the gameplay itself.
Yeah, for sure. And it does strike like, that really nice balance too.
And because it's like one of the things I was thinking about, like when I was deciding these things, was I was thinking about like audience expectations for like FPS games and such. And one of the things that's a very constant like through line in especially retro FPS is like nobody really cares about the story. Almost always their story is just like window dressing. It's like a basic premise or something, and then it's just like just go shoot stuff. And so that sort of got me thinking about like, okay, but that means that if I want to really commit to like writing a story and stuff, then worst case scenario is it sucks, and then people go, yeah, but the story sucks, but like who cares? It's a retro FPS. So that's very liberating in terms of like expectations and not worrying about like if I'm a good writer or not.
Yeah, well, I would say it's definitely not something you have to worry about in the slightest.
Well, thank you.
Because yeah, like I'm not a lore expert, but I read all the books and I read all the logs. I read all the stuff that's in there, so I experience Ultrakill in its entirety, and a very and of course I don't mean this in a bad way because it's a good consistent. It's a very consistent package, like all across the board. Everything's very high quality and just a joy to experience, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Of course. So kind of moving on. And it's kind, I don't know, maybe not the same exact question because yeah, but I'll just ask it. And of course we could focus on more recent content, of course, over the past 2 years. But the favorite thing that you've made for Ultrakill at this point.
I don't know. It's kind of, as a creator, it's difficult to like point out individual aspects that I would be more more partial to, I guess. But obviously, in terms of the game as a whole, the probably my favorite things are like how, like, even though it's so mechanically focused, like in terms of gameplay and stuff, it still has so much room for atmospheric sections and the sort of tone and feel of it instead of just being purely mechanical. And then in terms of mechanical success, obviously, I think it goes without saying that the marksman revolver is like the big thing.
Yeah.
Like in terms of recent things, my favorites have been very small things. Like whenever I look at gameplay now, one of the things that always sticks out to me as a thing I'm glad I did was, for this update, I updated how the explosions look. So now they have some improved particle effects in terms of like coloring and stuff, and they have a sprite that sort of fills out the center more, so it doesn't really feel like a hollow sphere anymore. And then there's a sort of scrolling texture that's very subtle to it, but that adds a little bit of emotion to it. And a very small thing as well is that, like, for the first couple of frames of the explosion's existence, the explosion is like fully like blank white, and then it only gets texture after a couple frames, so that it sort of gives it that like initial like sort of explosiveness, I guess.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like that's kind of exactly the answer I was looking for. Like, even if it's those little things, like there's such cool things that a lot of people are not gonna notice. And now that you've pointed them out, they will see it.
Yeah, and that's absolutely a result of the new process, because that, like, the reason I started iterating on the explosion visuals is because Salad was making explosions for his game Hair Trigger. Check it out, Twitter @RealHairTrigger, I think. I don't remember. Yeah, just go look it up, you'll find it. But he was working on the explosions for his game, and then he was doing like that kind of texture scrolling, and he did the blank white frames at the start, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. I should do that as well. And it's not something I would have done if not for the fact that we were in a voice chat and he was doing it on his end.
And for that it is @RealHairTrigger on Twitter, and that's hair as in rabbit, HARE.
It's gonna be very cool. You should definitely keep track of it.
I'll give it a follow right now. All right. Yeah, no, that's super cool to hear. Like, because of course, the general player is gonna have their favorite levels or fights or whatever, but it's I don't know. To me especially, it's super cool hearing like, oh yeah, I really like the particle effects on the explosion, like coming from you. Like, it's just such an interesting little thing. I love it. And then kind of going off with the atmosphere, like the atmosphere the game can bring. Like, people, the whole time this interview is going to be playing, people are just going to be like essentially watching atmospheric shots of Ultrakill, because that's what I'm using as filler footage for the background. So they'll get to see a lot of those just really cool like corridors and areas, especially. I'm really partial to layer 5 just because of I like water and just that kind of color palette in general. So there's at least like 4 or 5 different shots of just like caves with water dropping. It's super comfy locations. I loved it.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So the next few questions, I don't know, maybe not so much like negative like feelings of things you've done, but I think I have the okay, so yeah. Kind of well, not maybe okay, well, I missed one question here, but yeah, just kind of how feelings have changed over time on certain things. So starting off, is there anything that, made you kind of made it first and maybe weren't feeling it at first, but over time you started to like it more and more?
No, not really. For me, it's yeah, I often hear from other artists that it's like when they make something that initially they don't really like it, but then they sort of grow. Once they grow distant from it, that they start liking it more. But for me, usually the like during the process of making it, I'll ping pong back and forth very much of like I love it, I hate it, it sucks, it's great. But once it's actually done, I usually like it starts at that high point of like this is the best thing I've ever done because it's the most recent thing, and then it sort of just fades further out as I get better at making things that I start noticing these little things that could have been improved.
Yeah, and then kind of on the opposite side of that, is there anything that over time you feel like maybe you wanted to touch up a bit more, or you just something about it rubbed you the wrong way that you feel the need to change?
We want to do at some point once we get a bit more time, which is I don't know when, but
Yeah, of
we want to
course.
do visual pass on at least the limbo layer because I feel like that could use a little facelift. Because I think the prelude looks good, and I think Lust looks fine, and then everything after that, well, maybe Gluttony could use a pass as well, but everything after that is like, I think it's good in terms of like the visual quality and such. But Limbo and Gluttony could use another second pass of like, we're not gonna change. I'm probably not going to change the functionality of it, but just like in terms of like a visual pass of like improving inconsistencies and making things look a bit more up to par to what the later levels are going to be like are.
Yeah, I know one thing. Victoria mentioned the trees. When I asked her this question, the first thing that came to her mind were the trees in Limbo.
Yeah, because I just made those in like Pro Builder myself, so you
Yeah.
can see why generally we have a 3D artist on the team.
Yeah.
But it's the trees are definitely one of those things where I think we can do it in a better way that also like just on a visual consistency basis, but
Yeah, for
also
sure.
to make it in a way where it gets its idea across better. Because the idea is that those are supposed to be fake trees, so we can do it in a way where when you see them, you can be like, oh, those are trees, and then when you look closer, you can see, oh, these aren't real trees.
Interesting. Yeah, that's cool. Cool. Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that. I'm trying to think if I want to maybe ask this question in a slightly different way, but I don't think I will. Is what is there any particular thing that's taken you the longest to finish at this?
P2, absolutely. Because yeah, that was half a year on a single level.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty grueling.
Yeah, oh, I'm sure. Especially like you said earlier, it's a pretty hard level, so playtesting that's not going to be the easiest thing in the world.
Yeah, and because my process is so dependent on that, where it's like when I start the game, when I start the program like Unity after like at the start of a session, I always play through it, and whenever it's been whenever I change anything, I play through it, and whenever it's been a moment that I've been fucking browsing online or something, then I play through it again to refreshing myself. So there's a lot of constant playing that's a very very big part of why Ultrakill feels as like dense as it is. But also in specifically in terms of P2, that was a very compounding compounding factor of why it was so exhausting to work on, why it took so long.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Yeah, I mean, thinking about your process in general, it makes a lot of sense why P2 would would be what took the longest. Because it's like, I think my fastest clear time on it's like 5-6 minutes, something like that. So playing it, who knows how many times that you played through it? That's a lot of time.
Yeah, and there's a lot of cases of like making things slightly easier, not because I felt they were too hard, but just because it made them not flow very well. So just like remove a little enemy here or place this a little differently, or so there's a lot of like it was even though it's already exhausting to play as is, it was even more exhausting to play during development.
Yeah, I'm sure. So this is a question I kind of struggling with to word better. I don't know. I feel like the way I typed it out is worded fine, but you know, as layers have gone on, things have gotten more and more complex, and of course everyone's improved more and more. So is the kind of the constantly upping of complexity of the layers completely intentional, or is it more of a side effect of everyone improving and wanting to push themselves and kind of keep getting in the kind of personal desire to go further and further with each layer that comes out?
It's both basically, because like I mentioned at the start of the interview, like it's very much something I learned while making albums, that like it's a good idea for me at least to make them chronologically, so that I start at the beginning and stuff, because that means that there's like a constant uphill climb in terms of quality and such. So that was very much something that I've learned to lean into, in terms of like it's not like a conscious choice of like, oh, we're gonna make this level more complex and intricate than the previous levels, but it happens naturally. And then by making sure that we do things chronologically, that means that the sort of uphill climb in terms of quality and complexity is a organic process for the player as well.
Yeah, awesome. Because I kind of did bring that up with others as well, and they're like, yeah, I mean, you know, it helps that as the player keeps going, they're like, wow, this game just keeps getting better and better. And I don't remember.
And that's also one of the factors of why I don't want to go back and like iterate too much on old content.
Yeah.
And one of the things, like for an example, the Prelude only has 2 songs despite having 4 levels, not counting the boss level. And like occasionally I've thought about like, should I go back and make unique songs for 03 and 04? But if I go do that now, then those songs are gonna be so out of place, because they would probably be a lot more intricate and like and I guess more well made. That it would not only stick out in terms of like feeling like it doesn't belong, but also it would make the upcoming things about the limbo layer and such would make them feel worse in comparison.
Yeah, they would be. I guess the word you could use is overproduced for what is everything around it.
And that's also why I want to be careful when we do like a second pass on some of the early visuals to make sure that we don't do too much that it starts to feel out of place, but that just like we can find a marriage of like that simplicity with like making it a bit more fluid into like to fit with future things.
Yeah. All right. So just moving on. And for this question, I think I definitely want to kind of isolate it to the last 2 years of work. So essentially layer 5 and onward. But is there anything that's majorly influenced those specific layers?
It's a complicated problem because for me, like what influences I think is like specifically what I was just like experiencing around that time. Like you can if when you play the game, you can tell that there was a moment where I read through House of Leaves, and you can isolate that period of time and like things like that where it's very there isn't like a specific of like I'll use this as basis for this section or whatever. It's just this was what I was into at the time, so it sort of leaks into it. But recently, during our development sessions, we have a habit of like because we basically just sit in voice chat for the entire day. So when we like eat and stuff, we either watch slop on YouTube, like how many apples can you spawn in Minecraft before the game crashes or something, or Five Nights at Freddy's lore dump garbage or something. We either do that or we watch a show. And first we went through Columbo, and now we're working through the 80s Grenada Sherlock Holmes TV show, because those are both like completely episodic.
Yeah.
Which means they're perfect for that kind of thing where it's like, oh, well, Victoria isn't here today, but we can still continue watching because it doesn't matter what happens in this episode.
Yeah.
But one of the things we also watched, or I rewatched and saw for the first time, was a OVA series called Giant Robo, The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Oh, I have a friend that talks about that nonstop.
for good reason. And I hadn't seen it in a very long time, but watching it, I was like, man, this is like, I didn't realize how much this influenced my writing, not just specifically for Ultrakill, but in terms of like also just like things that I like to focus on, and in terms of like if you were to watch it and you didn't know, you probably wouldn't notice, but like there's some certain themes and ideas that are sort of like parallel to what I ended up doing with Ultrakill's story as well. And that's like I had completely forgotten about how much that story had affected me. But then watching it again, I was like, oh boy, that's sure.
That's
all these things
funny.
that I thought were my ideas were like they were evolved from.
A little bit of a uh-oh moment there.
Nothing to the point of like plagiarism or anything, but just like in terms of like, oh, this is where I got this from, and this is where this is the point that started my journey into this like idea or theme.
Yeah, that's like actually super cool though, because like, you know, kind of seeing where you got these ideas from, even if it was just so subconsciously that you essentially forgot about it and then just kind of had it buried in your subconscious for all this time. That's super cool to hear. Kind of shows that, you know, we never really know what we're influenced by.
Yeah, because it's such a, especially nowadays when media is so easy to find and consume, that like if you don't specifically have like a sort of database or logging system, it's very easy to forget what you've even seen or experienced.
For sure. Cool. Yeah, no, that was like like with all of these questions, pretty much exactly the kind of answer I was looking for. So thank you for that again.
It's a good thing we pre-screened these questions, so I had a moment to think about them.
Yeah. When you mentioned like, hopefully there's no big long awkward pauses, I was like, I have a question that might cause a big awkward pause.
Yeah, and just in general, it's like it usually takes me a moment to not just articulate a thing, but like try to remember it
Yeah, for
because
sure.
there's just so much
Oh yeah.
going on, not just with my life, but in the world in
Yeah.
general nowadays that
A lot
it's
to
like,
keep track of.
what did I do 2 weeks ago? I don't remember.
Oh, I feel that. I feel that for sure. All right. So then that's pretty much it for the Ultrakill. That is it for any Ultrakill related questions. The next things are mostly things for people that want to do things that you do, whether that be, the music aspect of it or the game dev aspect of it or really anything, or just are interested in the things you do or and want to start for themselves. This is mostly for those people at this.
Mhm.
So are there any tools or programs you would recommend?
No, it's I get this question a lot,
Yeah.
where people ask me like, "Oh, what program do you use to make music?" Because they hear my music and they like it and they want to make music like that.
Mhm.
And I could answer them, but usually I don't because um, the process I use is a really terrible uh, process that has gotten so much baggage over 10 years that I've used it that it's a Frankenstein process of using. Because what I do is I use a guitar tab program to write the MIDIs. Then I process the MIDIs in a program to give them sound fonts. And then now I added an additional step where I do the drums in Easy Drummer 3. And then I put that all in Audacity, where I do additional recording and mixing and stuff. So it's like you could do all that, I guess,
That's
or you can
also
just
so cursed though.
and or you could just pick up Cubase or FL Studio or something like that and just do all that and learn the process in a single program.
Yeah. You started listing off so many things that I haven't heard of or would never want to use. And
Yeah,
yeah.
if anyone has an incredibly cursed process like mine, I can recommend SynthFont 2 as being an amazing piece of software for an incredibly niche purpose that nobody uses anymore. But I had a funny thing recently when I was doing the music for Layer 7, where I had a bug with the software, and I sent an email to the guy who's updating the program and stuff. And it's been around for like 10 years or something now. And I sent him an email like, "Hey, I have this bug. Do you have any ideas of what that might be about?" And then he was like, "Oh, I'll take a look at it." And then I went to sleep, and by the time I woke up, he was like, "Hey, here's a version of the program with the bug fixed." I
I
was like,
remember
"Oh,
you posting that on Twitter and you're like, wow, this is great.
yeah." The what I would call like old head programmers are just built different.
Yeah.
And like those are the people who the modern society has is built on,
Yeah,
and
seriously.
half of them are furries.
It's just the way it goes sometimes.
Mm.
All right.
Yeah, one thing I can say just real quickly about tools and programs and such is, um, especially when it comes to making music, but honestly, anything is nowadays. Everything is so easy to pick up and easy to use that it really doesn't matter which program you use, because like as proof of that, like the music that I make has such a cursed process, but it's still like generally considered pretty good music,
Oh
I
yeah.
think. So it's like the program isn't what makes it good. It's just that your skills make it good. So you can use absolutely any kind of process. I forget the guy's name, but there was this Japanese electronic music composer who didn't have any like electronic devices when he started making it. So instead of having like synths and drum machines and stuff, he would just use a microphone to record sounds and then would use those sounds to make the music. So it would be like he would go out in the nature and like knock on trees and stuff, and that would be the kick drum.
Hey,
So it's like
if it works, it
you
works.
can yeah, and it gives it such a unique, interesting flavor of
Yeah.
like organic feeling, and it's like because of that weird process, like the end result is so unique and interesting that just in general, like you can do amazing things with any kind of piece of shit garbage. So just Google like good music making programs or good game development engines or whatever, and just look up videos on what those programs look like and how they work, and then from those pick up the one that seems most appealing to you and just get started, because the most important thing is just that you do something and not trying to over prepare for things.
Thank you. And that you kind of covered the next question too. I mean, maybe not so much a question. If you want to add anything on, do you have any parting words or advice for everyone listening?
I have like a billion zillion things I want to say to people who are getting into game development, but I think two of the really important things that I use as my sort of go-to when people ask is number one is fun isn't an automatic thing. Fun is a thing that you have to design into a game. So just because a game is cool doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be fun, and you have to actually put that in the process of making the game, that you have to figure out how can I make this fun? How is this fun? Like what it even means for a game to be fun? How a game is fun? Those are things that you have to consciously do and put in. And the other main thing is a problem I see very often with independent developers who are starting off is they leave the sound for later. And you should don't ever leave the sound for later. When you add a mechanic that's going to use a sound, you do the sound right now, because that is such an important factor of how it informs how the mechanic feels and how it should feel, that you really need to do it as soon as possible. Like, even honestly, I would say the sound of a thing is more important than the visuals of the thing. So those are the two things that I usually go to in terms of advice: is make sure you know that you're consciously putting in the effort to make something fun instead of it just being interesting or cool, and make sure that you do sound as soon as possible whenever possible.
Awesome. Yeah, great advice. Super great advice.
And if for people who don't know where to go for sound stuff, there's the GDC sound effect packs that are free. You can use those sound effects, and you'll probably know. When you start digging into them, you'll probably hear a lot of very familiar sound effects there, because most of Ultrakill sounds come from those, and I just edit them somewhat. Sometimes barely even bother editing them because they're just solid as is. And then obviously there's like freesound.com, but when you use that, I think it's .com, maybe it's .org, but when you use that, you have to make sure that whenever you search for a sound, you have to make sure that you either do Creative Commons 0, which is public domain, which is you can use the sound however you want, whenever you want. You don't need to credit anyone. Or Creative's Common 3, which is basically the same, except you have to credit the person who made the sound. So you have to keep those things in mind when you use other people's sound effects.
All right. And it is freesound.org
Okay.
for anyone wondering. Yeah. All right. That really wraps up all of our all of my questions for this year's interview. Where can people follow you or Ultrakill, whatever you want to say?
Well, I'm on YouTube, Hakita. I have gotten verified and stuff now, so it should be easy to find. And that's a very easy, safe place to because everyone has a fucking YouTube account. So you get easy way to subscribe, and then that'll keep you up to date on both my music and my game development. If you want terrible low quality posts and FUMO and JPEGs, and if you use the For You page, then a lot of gay shit. You can follow Hakita Dev on Twitter or X or whatever the fuck you call it now, or 2 weeks from now, or Ultrakill Game if you just wanna hear updates about Ultrakill specifically. And I'm also on Bandcamp as Heaven Pierce Her. So that's heavenpierceher.bandcamp.com. And you can also follow there if you want emails whenever I release a new piece of music. But I think those are sort of the primary places to follow.
Awesome. Thank you so much for everything again this year.
Thank you, and especially thank you for doing this amazing charity event again.
Oh yeah, of course. Donate to charity.
Yeah, donate to gay people again.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much. It means a lot to me, of course, that to have all of you participate and just to get your voices out there and really to the best of my ability show that it's not John Newblood making this game and that there's a whole big group of people working on it.
And it's not just me making the game.
Yeah, that especially. It's a nice big team of people, and I'm really glad I can.
Well, not very big, but definitely a team of people.
Yeah, true. Not super big, but it's not. I want everyone to have their. I don't know the words I'm looking for. I want everyone to know that who's working on this game because it's a great game. Tons of people enjoy it, and I want everyone.
And remember to check out the credits museum in Ultrakill to see more of who did what and sort of get individual messages from people.
Yeah. But that should be it for this interview. Thank you again so much, Hakita.
Thank you
for all of it. And let's get back to the charity event.
Wow.